Some roads are missing from maps for a reason. Hidden deep in the mountains of Japan, there is a tunnel no one admits exists. A place where footsteps return without bodies. Where voices call names they should not know. And where screams do not fade, they wait. This is not a legend meant to entertain. It is a warning meant to be heard. Tonight, you are about to enter the tunnel where screams echo forever. Chapter 1. The road that does not exist on any map. There has never been a tourist map in Japan that shows the name of that road. Not on Google Maps. Not on official signposts. Not in any public transportation records. And yet, deep in the mountains of Yamanashi Prefecture, hidden among ancient cedar trees that stand silent year after year, the local residents all know of a path they only dare to mention in hushed voices. They call it Michi no Koa, the Road of Voices. In daylight, if someone were to wander there by accident, it would seem like nothing more than an old concrete road, cracked and overgrown with moss, leading straight into a narrow tunnel. The tunnel entrance is pitch black, so deep that sunlight cannot reach its end, resembling the open mouth of something waiting patiently. There is no smell of dampness. No wind, only a stillness so unnatural it makes your ears ring. But the villagers say that daytime is only the surface. Once the sun sets, the road is no longer the same road. Drivers traveling late at night have sworn that sometime between 11 p.m. and dawn, a weathered road sign appears out of the fog, faded, peeling, with a single line of text barely legible. Strangely, that sign does not exist during the day. Even more unsettling is this. Although they are certain they never turned off the main road. After only a moment of distraction, their vehicle is suddenly facing the tunnel entrance. No one hears wind blowing from inside the tunnel. No one hears dripping water. The only sound that emerges from within is a faint murmur, stretched thin by concrete and stone. At first, it resembles an echo, but if you stand there long enough, a realization creeps in and chills your spine. The sound is calling your name. Not loudly, but softly, in a familiar voice. The voice of someone you have lost. Someone you miss. Someone you regret never speaking to one last time. The people of Yamanashi pass down an old warning. Greater than, if you see that road for the first time at night. It is not the first time it has seen you. And from that moment on, you are no longer alone. Chapter 2. The band that was buried. There is no barricade in front of the tunnel. No warning sign. No tape sealing it off. Yet in Yamanashi, no one needs a sign to know that the place is forbidden. The older villagers still remember clearly a single autumn morning in 1973, when the road leading to the tunnel simply vanished from all transportation plans. There was no announcement, no public meeting. Overnight, workers arrived, dismantled the road signs, painted over the route name in thick black strokes, and erased it from local maps as if it had never existed. One county official, drunk during a late-night gathering, once muttered, "Greater than, we didn't close the road because it was dangerous. We closed it because we couldn't control it." All documents related to the tunnel were sealed shortly afterward. Accident reports were reduced to blank pages or lines crudely blacked out. In the damp, rotting archives of the municipal office, only a single scrap of paper remains, unsigned, unstamped, written in a trembling hand. Greater than, not a collapse. Not a mechanical failure. The cause was sound. No one ever explained what that sound was. The engineers who participated in the final inspection of the tunnel later refused all interviews. Some transferred far away, some retired far earlier than expected, and according to local rumor, at least 2 took their own lives within a year. People said that after entering the tunnel one last time to take measurements, those men never slept properly again. At night, they would jolt awake in terror, hearing voices calling from somewhere inside their own heads, not through their ears, but directly through their thoughts. The government officially declared the area no longer suitable for use. But strangely, the tunnel was never destroyed. When villagers asked why it was not sealed shut, they received only silence. An elderly woman whispered, "Greater than, it's not that they didn't want to seal it. It's that they couldn't." Every time concrete was poured to block the entrance, It cracked open from the inside by morning, as if something within the tunnel was still breathing. From that point on, the tunnel no longer belonged to maps or to authorities. It belonged to things that were never meant to be named. Chapter 3. The Night Road Watchman. His name was Kawabata Masao. For more than 20 years, he was the only night road watchman assigned to the mountain stretch near the tunnel. No one remembered exactly when he started. They only knew that even after the road was erased from every map, he remained. When people asked why he never requested a transfer, Kawabata would give a thin smile and say, "Greater than, because if I'm not there, then who will hear them?" His shift began at 9 every night. From a small, weathered wooden guard hut, he had a clear view of the tunnel entrance, half swallowed by trees and shadow. At first, everything was normal. No traffic, no animals, no strong wind. But after 11 p.m., the air around the tunnel changed. Kawabata wrote in a notebook his family later found after his death. Greater than, it doesn't get colder. It gets quieter than it should. Every night at exactly 11:17 p.m., sounds of footsteps echoed from deep inside the tunnel. They were steady, neither rushed nor slow. What terrified him was not the sound itself, but the direction. The footsteps were coming out. Kawabata would stand, raise his flashlight, and shine it toward the tunnel. The beam revealed only damp concrete walls, glistening with moisture. No figure, no movement, and yet, the footsteps never stopped. Sometimes they sounded as if they were directly behind him, even though he was facing the tunnel entrance. One night, he heard whispering. Not an echo. Not the wind. A clear, hoarse voice spoke his name. Greater than, Kawabata-san. The voice did not come from the tunnel. It came from just behind his left ear. From that night on, he never turned his back on the tunnel again. During his shifts, he sat with his back pressed against the hut wall, eyes fixed on the entrance until tears streamed down from strain and exhaustion. In the final pages of his notebook, his handwriting grew uneven and shaky. Greater than, they are not angry. They just want to be heard. And every night, they stand closer. 3 weeks before his death, Kawabata abruptly resigned. On his last night, he locked the guard hut and walked back toward the village. He never made it home. The next morning, his road watchman's cap was found placed neatly in front of the tunnel entrance, facing inward, as if he had finally turned around. Chapter 4. The Scream with No Owner. In the summer of 2001, 4 archaeology students from a university in Tokyo traveled to Yamanashi with a simple goal: to document local legends before they disappeared. They did not believe in ghosts. What they believed in was forgotten history, stories distorted by time and fear. The tunnel was only one stop on their list. They arrived in the late afternoon. In daylight, the entrance looked far smaller than the villagers had described. Sunlight still reached several dozen meters inside, revealing cracked concrete and water stains along the ceiling. The air was cool and dry, almost ordinary. One of them joked, "People are just afraid of their own imagination." They set up a tripod and placed a recording microphone near the middle of the tunnel. Then they stepped back outside to monitor the equipment. The recorder was left running. No one stayed inside. At exactly 6:42 p.m., the device captured something unusual. At first, there was only faint static, like background noise. Then a woman's voice emerged, soft, close, as if leaning down toward the microphone. "Greater than, please. Don't leave me here." There was no echo. No distortion. The voice was so clear it could not be accidental. What made it impossible to explain was this: at that exact moment, the entire group was standing outside the tunnel, nearly 50 meters away. No one spoke, no one entered. When they replayed the recording, the atmosphere among them shifted completely. The sound technician noticed something that left them silent. The voice repeated itself every 37 seconds. With no variation whatsoever. Like a breath trapped in time. As dusk approached, they returned to the tunnel to investigate. Standing inside, they heard nothing at all. Absolute silence. No wind, no insects, no movement. But the moment they stepped back outside, the scream returned through their headphones. As if whatever was inside did not want to be seen. but desperately wanted to be left behind. That night, the group stayed at a small inn near the village. None of them slept deeply. One of the female students woke abruptly after midnight, convinced she had heard whispering right beside her ear, even though the room was empty. They left Yamanashi early the next morning. The recording was never officially released. Only a leaked copy surfaced years later on an old internet forum, accompanied by a single warning line. Greater than, the sound does not play when you listen. It plays when you try to leave. Chapter 5. The Incident of 1973. Of everything connected to the tunnel, the year 1973 is the one the people of Yamanashi never speak of in full. They stop halfway through their sentences. They avert their eyes, and almost instinctively, they glance toward the mountains, as if afraid that finishing the story might allow something to hear it. That winter, a temporary bus route was put into operation to transport construction workers from the mountain barracks through the tunnel, supporting a road expansion project. The bus ran a final trip just before midnight. There were 23 people on board, including the driver. According to the few surviving technical records, the bus lost power in the middle of the tunnel. There was no crash, no collision. The headlights remained on. The electrical system showed no obvious failure. And yet, the engine would not restart. A rescue call came through the radio. In the recorded transmission, the driver's voice was trembling. Greater than, there's a sound. There are people in the tunnel. But they're not here. Those were the last words received. When the rescue team finally reached the location, the bus doors were wide open. The interior lights were still on. Jackets, helmets, and personal bags were scattered across the seats. But not a single person remained on board. There were no signs of struggle. No blood. No screams. Only deep scratch marks along the concrete walls, stretching dozens of meters and leading farther into the tunnel. The marks were uneven, some at head height, others scraping the ground, as if people had been running, stumbling, falling, and crawling blindly into the darkness. What horrified the rescuers most were the fingernail marks. Human nails were embedded in the concrete. Some were broken off entirely, lodged in cracks. A few still had traces of flesh attached. There was no tunnel collapse. No toxic gas detected. Yet those who stood inside long enough later swore they could hear heavy breathing echoing from deep within the mountain, not from one person, but from many. The incident was officially labeled a serious mechanical accident and swiftly sealed off. The families of the missing were never given bodies to bury, only compensation and a request for silence. 3 days later, while the area was still under strict lockdown, someone emerged from the tunnel at dawn. But that is the story of the next chapter. Chapter 6. The one who returned was no longer human. 3 days after the incident in 1973, while the road was still under complete lockdown and no journalists were allowed near the site, a man emerged from the tunnel at exactly 4:18 a.m. No one saw him step out like a normal survivor. The guards only noticed his presence when they heard the sound of bare footsteps dragging across the frozen road. Slow and uneven. He was not wearing shoes. No helmet. No winter coat, despite the cold. His entire body was coated in a gray dust, like ash, clinging to his skin, his hair, and the corners of his eyes, which had dried stiff. His eyes were wide open, yet focused on nothing at all, as if he were staring through the guards. Through the air, into somewhere far deeper, somewhere no one else could see. When restrained, he did not resist. He did not ask where he was. He did not ask what had happened. His mouth only moved, repeating the same words over and over in a hoarse whisper. Greater than, they're still in there. They're not silent. They're just whispering. A doctor was called immediately. Throughout the examination, the man never blinked. His pupils reacted poorly. His heartbeat was irregular. But what froze everyone in the room was when he suddenly turned his head toward the tunnel entrance, despite being nearly 100 meters away, and began to cry. Greater than, don't seal it. Not all of them are out. He died 3 hours later in a temporary medical unit. The autopsy report was never released, but a leaked note from a nurse present that morning revealed an impossible detail. His lungs were filled with stone dust, damp earth, and fragments of concrete, as if he had been breathing inside the mountain for hours, perhaps days. There were no external injuries consistent with suffocation. No trauma to explain it. Only faint handprints on the back of his clothing, not from the front, but from behind, suggesting that many hands had once clung to him, trying to pull him back. Moments before his heart stopped, he suddenly regained clarity. He looked directly at the doctor and spoke one final sentence, calm and unmistakably clear. Greater than, if you hear them call, please don't answer. After his death, authorities permanently sealed the route and erased all names connected to the incident from public records. The man who returned was never officially identified. His family was never notified. As if he had never existed at all. But from that night onward, the guards swore to one thing. The number of breaths echoing from inside the tunnel had increased. Chapter 7. The tunnel that opens after midnight. The people of Yamanashi measure time around the tunnel in a way unlike anywhere else. They do not say, day, or night. They say, before midnight, and after midnight. Because once the clock passes 12 a.m., the tunnel no longer behaves like something that can be understood by sight, by footsteps, or by distance. According to old engineering records, the tunnel is only 300 meters long. A healthy adult walking at a normal pace should be able to cross it in less than 5 minutes. Daytime inspections confirmed this again and again. Every measurement matched. Nothing was wrong. But those who entered the tunnel after midnight told a completely different story. They said their headlights stretched forward endlessly, never reaching an end. The light seemed to dissolve into a thick gray haze, swallowed before it could touch the far wall. The concrete on both sides began to look identical, repeating itself so perfectly that all sense of direction vanished, as if the tunnel was no longer moving forward, but looping in place. One truck driver told police that he had been driving inside the tunnel for over 40 minutes. Even though his fuel gauge never moved, the digital clock on his dashboard froze at 12:11 a.m., refusing to change while the engine continued to run. When panic set in and he tried to turn the vehicle around, his hands went cold. The entrance was gone. Behind him was no exit. Only more tunnel, stretching on exactly like the road ahead. He pressed the horn. The sound blared through the concrete, then answered from behind him. Half a second later. Not an echo. A reply. Others who walked through the tunnel late at night reported hearing footsteps syncing with their own. Always half a beat slower. When they stopped, the footsteps stopped. When they moved again, the sound followed, close enough to feel cold breath brushing the back of their necks. No one dared to turn around, because those who did never returned to describe what they saw. Urban researchers later tried to explain the phenomenon as psychological spatial distortion. The villagers only shook their heads. Greater than, the tunnel isn't getting longer. They said, you're just going deeper inside it. Those who escaped near dawn said the exit suddenly appeared, as if it had never vanished at all. But before stepping out, every one of them heard the same thing. A collective sigh, rising from deep within the mountain. Not angry. Not threatening. Just heavy with disappointment. As if the road had almost succeeded in keeping them there. Chapter 8. The Faceless Figures. The first photographs of the tunnel began appearing online in the late 2000s. They were not artistic shots. Not stage. Just hurried pictures taken by passers-by, urban explorers, and those who did not believe the rumors. At first glance, the images looked ordinary. An old tunnel. Stained concrete walls. Dim, uneven lighting. But when zoomed in, something was always wrong. Along the edges of the tunnel, where the light struggled to reach, faint human shapes could be seen standing close to the walls. So close they appeared to be blending into the concrete itself. They did not move. They cast no independent shadows. They were simply there, figures of varying heights, standing silently, as if waiting. All of them shared one horrifying trait. None of them had faces. Where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been, there was only a smooth darkness, as if their features had been erased. Some figures tilted their heads slightly. Others leaned forward, but none ever faced the camera directly. The people who took the photographs swore that no one was there when they pressed the shutter. Only later, when they reviewed the images at home, did the figures appear. One amateur photographer returned to the tunnel repeatedly, determined to capture clearer proof. The final post he ever uploaded contained a single sentence. Greater than, they don't stand still. They just don't move when you look. After that, his account vanished. Friends claimed he had moved away, yet his rented room was left untouched. And inside his camera, the final photograph showed the tunnel wall at extremely close range, as if he had stepped far too near to something he should not have approached. Those who claimed to see the figures with their own eyes said the most terrifying part was not their appearance, but their posture. Every one of them faced away from the exit. Every one of them turned toward the deeper darkness of the tunnel, as if they were listening. And if you stood there long enough, you would realize something far worse. They were not staring into the dark. They were staring at something beyond the dark. One survivor later whispered, "Greater than, I wasn't afraid of them. I was afraid of what they were afraid of." From then on, the villagers added another unspoken rule. Greater than, if you see figures standing along the tunnel walls, never walk through the space between them, because that empty space was never meant for the living. Chapter 9. The voice that calls your name. Not everyone who enters the tunnel hears the voice. Those who travel in groups, talking loudly, playing music, or laughing nervously often hear nothing but the echo of their own movements. But those who enter in silence, carrying heavy thoughts, unspoken regrets, or a quiet emptiness inside them, sooner or later, they all hear it. At first, it feels familiar, like the moment just before someone calls your name. Your ears grow warm. The air thickens. Each footstep sounds unnaturally loud. Then the voice comes. Not loud, not urgent, just a soft call from behind you. Greater than. No one should be calling you in that voice, except those who once mattered most. Some hear the voice of a deceased mother. Some hear an old lover. Some hear their own voice as a child, clear, innocent, untouched by fear. The voice does not beg. It does not threaten. It only says your name, as if confirming that you are still there. Those who survived say the most dangerous moment is when you answer it in your thoughts. Even if your lips never move, a single idea, "Did someone just call me?" is enough. From that moment on, the voice moves closer. Some feel warm breath brushing the back of their neck. Some hear fabric scraping lightly against concrete. Some even feel a hand resting on their shoulder, so gentle it feels like imagination. And all of them share the same instinct. They turn around. When they do, they see nothing. But from that instant, the tunnel changes. The light dims. The distance stretches. And the voice no longer calls their name. Instead, it begins to tell stories. It recites memories you thought you had forgotten. Secrets you never shared with anyone. Regrets buried deepest inside you, without a single mistake. One survivor later said, his voice shaking, "Greater than, I wasn't afraid because it knew my name. I was afraid because it knew what I had never said out loud." The villagers believe the tunnel does not create the voice. It only amplifies what already exists within you. Unfinished memories, unresolved goodbyes, words that never reached their destination. That is why they offer a cruelly simple warning. Greater than, if you carry too many things you cannot let go of, never enter the tunnel. Because inside, someone is always willing to listen. Chapter 10. The route with no escape. When humans realize they are in danger, their first instinct is to run. Inside the tunnel, it is no different. Those who hear the voice, glimpse the figures, or sense the space twisting around them all react the same way. They move faster, search for the exit, and try to escape as quickly as possible. But it is in that moment they discover something terrifying. The tunnel does not allow you to flee. A taxi driver once described his experience during a brief police interview. He entered the tunnel shortly after 1 in the morning, hoping to take a shortcut home. When he realized his headlights could not reach the end, he pressed the accelerator. The speedometer climbed. The engine roared. But the scenery did not change. The concrete walls slid past at the same slow pace, as if the car were standing still. The sensation made him nauseous, like running in a dream where your legs no longer belong to you. Panicking, he laid on the horn. The sound screamed through the tunnel, ricocheting off the walls, then came back from behind him, half a beat later. Not an echo. A response. He slammed the brakes, threw open the door, and ran on foot. His footsteps thundered wildly, uneven and desperate, but after only a few meters, he heard another rhythm blend with his own, steadier, calmer. Without looking, he knew. Whatever followed him was not in a hurry. Whenever he stopped to gasp for air, the footsteps stopped. When he ran again, they followed, maintaining just enough distance to ensure he could never forget they were there. What nearly drove him insane, he said, was not the darkness, but the feeling that the tunnel was shrinking. The ceiling seemed lower, the air grew thick and heavy, each breath burning his lungs. When he screamed for help, his voice echoed forward, and returned in another voice, hoarser and distorted, yet still shaped by his own words. At last, exhausted beyond fear, he collapsed to his knees and stopped running. And in that instant, the tunnel stopped as well. It did not stretch farther. It did not tighten its grip. Moments later, a dim light appeared ahead, the exit. He crawled out just as dawn began to break, his body shaking, fingernails broken, his throat raw from screaming. The taxi was never found. The people of Yamanashi later said, "Greater than, the tunnel does not kill those who run. It only keeps those who refuse to stop." And somewhere deep within, the road seemed to understand perfectly who was trying to escape, and who was already willing to stay. Chapter 11. The Truth Behind the Screams. The screams echoing through the tunnel did not appear by accident. They were not a collective hallucination, nor a trick of reflected sound. The people of Yamanashi believed that every scream once belonged to a real human being. When forgotten documents were finally unearthed, old wartime maps, abandoned construction journals, and discarded engineering records, a chilling pattern began to emerge. The tunnel had been built directly above an unmarked mass grave, the site of a major landslide during the war. At the time, hundreds of forced laborers and local workers were driven to carve a passage through the mountain under brutal conditions. One night of relentless rain caused the slope to collapse. The tunnel was unfinished, with no emergency exits. Those trapped inside were buried alive. There was no proper rescue effort. The project was quietly abandoned. To save time and avoid scandal, the authorities poured concrete over the entire area, sealing the dead beneath what would later become the road's foundation. That was when the screams began. Not immediately, but gradually, as the concrete hardened, as the air thinned, as the trapped realized no one was coming. Their final sounds were absorbed into the stone, the soil, the mountain itself. Spiritual researchers later suggested that the tunnel had become a conduit of memory. It does not create pain. It only records it. That is why the screams never weaken. They do not tire. They do not fade. They repeat, not to frighten, but simply to continue existing. An elderly monk was once invited to perform a purification ritual. He left after a single night. Before departing, he offered only one sentence. Greater than, this is not a place of vengeful spirits. This is a place of those who were never heard. The authorities attempted memorials, prayers, incense offerings. All failed. No one knew exactly how many had died. No names, no graves, no days of mourning. And so the tunnel continued to scream. Not out of hatred, but as a reminder that some deaths were never allowed to be remembered. Chapter 12. The Road That Chooses Its Victims. One detail about the tunnel has always defied explanation. Not everyone can see the road. Some people pass through the area dozens of times, by day and by night, without ever noticing a turnoff, a sign, or the tunnel itself. To them, the mountains remain ordinary, silent, empty. But to others, the road reveals itself. The rare witnesses who do see it share one disturbing common trait. In the days or hours before encountering the road, they are almost always carrying a very specific state of mind: unresolved guilt, fresh grief, unbearable loss, or a desperate longing to hear one familiar voice again. Some have just come from a funeral. Some are fleeing a mistake they cannot undo. Some are simply too exhausted to keep suppressing what they feel. And then, in the fog of night, the sign appears. It is not bright. Not clear. Just visible enough to suggest that if you turn here, you might finally stop hearing the voices inside your own head. The villagers believe the tunnel does not hunt its victims through force. It does not drag. It does not chase. It simply opens itself to those who are already willing to listen. A psychologist who once interviewed several survivors made a controversial observation. Greater than, the tunnel does not choose the weak. It chooses those who are already fractured. The road becomes a space where personal memory and collective memory overlap. Those who enter do not only hear the screams of others, they hear the part of themselves that has been crying out for too long. That is why some people emerge without physical injury, yet are never the same again. They speak less, sleep less, their eyes seem distant, as if something essential was left behind in the mountain. An elderly villager once said quietly, "Greater than, the road doesn't need to keep you. If you want to stay, you will stop on your own." And that, more than anything else, is what terrifies those who know the truth. Because not everyone who disappears is taken. Some people choose to remain, just to hear the voice one final time. Chapter 13. The messages on the walls. Not everyone who enters the tunnel hears the screams right away. Some walk deep inside for a long time before realizing that they are no longer alone. And those are the ones who leave behind something more terrifying than sound itself. Warnings. Along the concrete walls of the tunnel, in the darkest stretches where light barely survives, there are markings carved directly into the surface. No paint, no chalk, only scratches made by human fingernails, layered over one another, cut so deep they bite into the concrete itself. Not all of the writing is readable. Many lines dissolve into chaotic grooves, as if the person carving them no longer had the clarity to form words. But where the marks remain legible, fragments of messages can still be pieced together. Greater than, don't listen. Don't stop. Don't turn around. Some of the writing is low to the ground, etched at knee or floor level, as if written while crawling. Other lines stretch above head height, the grooves jagged and uneven, revealing the panic of their final moments. And more than any other message, one sentence appears again and again, carved across countless sections of the wall. Greater than, if you hear the screams, it's already too late. What unsettles researchers most is not the content, but the age of the markings. Some scratches can be dated to before 1973. Others are disturbingly recent, their edges still sharp, concrete dust barely settled. As if those who were trapped never fully disappeared. Another detail chills anyone who studies the walls closely. There are no arrows pointing toward an exit. No directions. No pleas for rescue. Every message is a warning. A trauma specialist once remarked, "Greater than, when people reach absolute despair, they don't try to save themselves. They try to stop others from making the same mistake." Those who have seen the messages with their own eyes often report the same after effect. After leaving the tunnel, they begin to dream of words appearing on the walls of their own homes, sentences forming on surfaces that were once completely smooth. And in those dreams, they understand something that tightens the chest with dread. The messages were never meant to save them. They were carved to keep them conscious just long enough. Until the voices began to speak. Chapter 14. The final warning. The people of Yamanashi do not call them laws. They call them things that must be remembered. No one knows when these rules first appeared. They were never written down, never posted on walls, never taught in schools. They are passed from mouth to ear, from the old to the young, during quiet nights when the wind moves through the mountains. The first rule is always spoken in a very low voice. Greater than, if you are driving at night and see a tunnel you have never seen during the day, turn around immediately. No hesitation. No curiosity. Because that road is not waiting for you to discover it. It has already discovered you. The second rule is even more frightening. Greater than, if you have already entered, do not answer any voice, even if it belongs to the person you love most. The villagers believe that the moment you respond, even silently, even in your thoughts, you are acknowledging their presence. And once acknowledged, the tunnel does not release you easily. The third rule is rarely spoken aloud. Greater than, never turn around. When you hear footsteps behind you, not because what stands behind you is worse than what lies ahead, but because turning around is the first sign that you are listening. There is another reason no one has ever truly tried to destroy the tunnel. In the past, heavy machinery was brought in to seal the entrance. Each attempt ended the same way. Equipment failed without explanation. Workers were injured by accidents no one could clearly describe. Some swore they heard rhythmic knocking from inside the concrete, as if something were counting. An elderly monk once said during the village's final meeting on the matter, "Greater than, if you destroy that place. The screams will not disappear. They will simply have nowhere left to stay." And so the villagers chose to leave the tunnel as it is. They do not worship it. They do not curse it. They do not speak its name. They simply avoid it. The way humans have always learned to live beside things they cannot understand. Because they believe this, the road is not dangerous because it exists. It is dangerous because it remembers. Chapter 15. The screams are still there. Even today, the road does not appear on any official map. There are no coordinates. No clear satellite images. It is as if a deliberate blank space has been left behind in the mountains of Yamanashi. Yet on nights when the fog grows thick and sound seems to vanish into damp air, those who live near the mountain still hear faint echoes drifting through the darkness. It is never clear whether they are cries or whispers, only that they rise and fall with the rhythm of human breathing. Sometimes it sounds like weeping. Sometimes like a voice calling a name. Sometimes only a long, collective exhale, as though many people are waiting together for an answer that never came. Those who survived the tunnel all share the same mark. Not a wound, not a scar, but a lasting silence. They speak less. They sleep less. And when someone calls their name in a crowd, they often hesitate before turning around, as if they have learned something too late. That not every voice is meant for the living. The road does not hunger for victims. It does not chase. It does not lure. It simply exists, quietly, carrying the memories of those who were never allowed to be heard. And somewhere deep within the mountain, the screams continue to echo. They do not weaken. They do not end. They wait for one more person who walks far enough in silence to listen. You've reached the end of the story, but the tunnel has not reached the end of you. If you ever find yourself on a road you don't remember taking, and a voice calls your name from behind, remember what the survivors learned too late. Not every path leads forward. Not every voice wants you to leave. And some screams are still echoing.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.